Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk just very briefly about lower chest development. We're not going to really get into upper chest development today. And there seems to be some debates and a lot of questions people are asking about the weighted dips versus a decline bench versus the flat bench, and which is the best one for them to build up the lower chest, the pectoralis major, which is the majority of your chest muscle. And I'll state up front, I think all three of them are good exercises. They all have their uses. All three of them can build your lower chest and most of your chest fairly effectively and can give you a big chest, but each has their pros and cons, and they're going to vary a little bit from person to person. Now, there's been debates regarding how much adduction of the humerus is involved in each one. I've seen people discuss this regarding things like the decline versus the dips. And I will state, as I've stated over and over and over again, involving every function of a muscle is not critical for hypertrophy. It is not required to get a muscle as large as you can possibly get it. You do not have to activate every single function of a muscle with multiple functions. This is more related to athletic performance. If you have a plane of motion or a peak joint angle that you need to be maximized in performance for your sport, that's where these things become important. It isn't required that you work every function optimally in order to get maximum hypertrophy. It just isn't. It's about how much workload you can subject the muscle to, how much metabolic fatigue, how much mechanical tension, all that you can subject the muscle to. It just isn't required. So I think the weighted dip can still be a very, very good chest exercise. The issue that comes in with the weighted dip is potential safety. This is the only negative I see with this lift. Outside of that, it's a fantastic movement. It can be relatively dangerous. I have seen guys actually crack their sternum while doing weighted dips, which sounds weird, but the way it puts the stress on it, I've seen it happen. I've known two guys who've done it. They've actually cracked their sternum, confirmed with x-rays, while doing weighted dips. And because you can stretch so deep at the bottom, you can overstretch with a heavy weight. Once you start going really heavy, hanging 100, 150 pounds off of a belt, to where you end up damaging your shoulder joint, your rotator cuff, from overextending down at the bottom. And outside of that, that's the only real concern. Now, when we get into the decline versus the flat bench, and again, this is nothing to do with athletic performance, powerlifting, or your sport, because I would not have most athletes do a decline bench. So we're talking purely muscle building for probably the majority of people, 2/3, 3/4 of people, depending upon your structure. The decline bench will probably stimulate more pec muscle and more pec development in your lower chest than the flat bench. I do not want you guys pulling the flat bench out of my novice program. I've covered before why I have it in there in spite of this. But for more intermediate type lifters, they might need to gravitate towards a decline bench depending upon their structure. If you can get a proper stretch and you feel the stretch at the bottom, and you get a full range of motion in your decline, go ahead and do it. But if you're someone like me and you have a very large rib cage, for me personally, and people with structures similar to mine, the decline bench is just a tricep movement because my rib cage gets in the way. It cuts about 4 to 5 inches out of the range of motion. I move the weight a lot less, and particularly lose range of motion to the bottom where the chest is getting the most work when I do a decline bench. To me, it feels the exact same as doing a 2-board press, and for me, it becomes a tricep builder, not a chest builder. So it depends on your structure because the bar just hits your rib cage. So for someone like me, I get better chest stimulation and I feel more chest involvement as a result of the deeper range of motion to the bottom from a flat bench. So when discussing the two, it comes down to individual structure. However, I will agree with some people who are discussing the decline being superior, that probably for the majority, over half of people, it is probably better at stimulating the pecs due to their structure. But for a smaller group of people, such as myself, depending upon your structure, it can be inferior because you're losing quite a bit of range of motion at the bottom, which is where the chest gets more work at. But used correctly, and if you're using the technique correctly, irrespective of what your structure is, you can still probably develop a good chest off of all three, any of the three. It's just there are concerns and issues with each one. As long as you're using a proper technique and form that activates the chest and you're using progressive overload, eating enough and resting enough, you will gain significant amounts of chest size off of any of the three. So just weigh those things out when deciding which one to use. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go.